You guys gonna make out now?
Oh my god, totally. We're so gonna make out. No, seriously, I'm gonna go check on the cable car back down the trip.
All right. See you, man.
See ya.
One of my favorite exclusives for the PS4 was Until Dawn. Until Dawn's developer Supermassive was a relative unknown at the time, having really only done odd jobs like DLC for Little Big Planet, remastering Killzone, or making some gimmicky PlayStation Move games. But their coming out party was 2015's Until Dawn, which cemented their horror movie you could play style of game that focused on detailed motion capture of high-profile actors and featured branching choice-based gameplay where characters could die and change the ending that you got. I had a blast with it and managed to keep all my characters alive until the finale, where I set off a horrible chain reaction that killed all but one. And you know what?
That was awesome.
This formula of light on the gameplay, heavy on choose-your-own-adventure style cinematic storytelling would become Supermassive's calling card, and they went on to release the 3-part Dark Pictures Anthology in the same style over the next 6 years. I played the first entry, Man of Medan, but was so put off by the boring characters, the unchangeable doomer ending, and the fact that the twist was that there was no twist, that I essentially wrote these games off.
Oh boy.
So when the Quarry released not too awfully long ago and looked to intentionally recall the modern day, kind of monster slasher style horror story of Until Dawn, I was intrigued. But was this a return to form, or more of the same, tired, barely there gameplay that Supermassive had massively leaned on for perhaps too long? Well, let's make like a quarry and rock out. Make like a quarry and rock out. Like a rock quarry? That's the worst lead in yet.
Oh boy.
So perhaps the most pressing question for any Supermassive game is, does the presentation hold up? Yes and no. There's some slowdown here and there and some pop in on a poster very early on in the game, and this type of thing comes up from time to time, but it's not too prevalent. Fortunately, the game looks really sleek otherwise. It's got a really nice balance of shadows and some really nice textures, especially skin textures. The roster of semi-well-known actors is well captured here for the most part, especially familiar faces like Justice Smith of Detective Pikachu and Dungeons & Dragons, and Ariel Winter of Modern Family fame. We even get to see horror staples like David Arquette from Scream.
I'm like the chillest flippin' bro in the whole world, man.
Sam Raimi's brother Ted, who's been in a million things.
Now get out of here.
And Grace Zabriskie, also known as Laura Palmer's mother Sarah from Twin Peaks, and they all look and animate pretty well for the most part. I will say though that the motion capture on certain people looks positively plastic. This poor woman, who's a fine-looking lady in real life, looks like some kind of freaky meme in-game, her mouth contorting into all sorts of outrageous Joker smiles while somehow not moving her lower jaw. Now, it could also be her facial musculature just not being conducive to the motion capture process, but she's a prime example of no matter how far the tech comes, there's still some distracting holes in the process.
I think I've made my point.
I will say though that the resident cutie pie and bearer of Kevin Malone's children, Brenda Song, looks and animates very well, and is the star of the show in that regard. Now, as for the actual performances themselves, they're generally speaking decent, some really fun in the case of the cameos, some feel uncomfortable in their roles, and some flat out steal the show. Some dialogue is dumb, some is meant to be dumb, and sometimes the writing is downright hilarious. We essentially are just playing the mostly unlikable, dumb camp counselor kids from those awful Friday the 13th movies who get caught up in some nasty goings-on in the Hackett's Quarry region that some of the locals know about and try to suppress. Unsuccessfully. My favorite character, besides Brenda Song's capable Caitlin, is Dylan, played by Tim Robbins' son, Miles Robbins. At first his California vocal fry got on my nerves, and then I realized that it was a feature of his sarcasm, not a bug, and he steals the show with some fantastic line reads and improv, bolstered by some genuinely funny writing, like this scene in the radio room between he and Justice Smith's character, Marble Mouth McGee. Ryan. Ryan is his name.
So what should I say?
Just make it sound urgent.
Okay. Hello, how's it going out there? This is, we need help. This is, we are counselors at Hackett's Quarry Summer Camp, and there's been a horrible accident, attack, some stuff bad here. We need your help. There is a swarm of bears, and they are everywhere, and there's these hunters too, and they seem to be shooting at the bears but also at us, which is not good, and a few of our friends are hurt, and we are in desperate need of help. So please, there's vicious bears, and we don't know what to do, so please Come help us, SOS. This is an emergency. Save our ship. Come on down. Please help us. Did I do good? Was that?
Swarm of bears?
Yeah.
Herd of bears.
Yeah, I've heard of bears, but...
Oh my god.
But beyond the performances, the story itself is kind of a mixed bag. Until Dawn's not some pinnacle of writing, but it worked very well to give the characters a likable enough outline to care about their fates and laid down some proper lore and intrigue as it went. But like those horrible Friday the 13th movies, the kids are generally kind of annoying, insufferable, and fairly dumb, and all have this valley vibe to them that will either delight you with its awfulness or tickle you because it's so fitting. In fact, I even guided one particular offender to her death on purpose, even after the game clearly had the character say she could either open a hatch and die immediately or just explore another area. These are not the most likable people in the world, and so any time spent apart from, say, Dylan's charm or Caitlin's moxie becomes rather bland. I did like the opening two characters who wind up being pretty important, the dude of which has just been cast to play Jimmy Olsen in the upcoming Superman Legacy, which is kind of cool, but there's too much and too little going on that often abandons the things that are working well for the story. Now, I'll hold off on specific spoilers here, but I'm kind of amazed at how much the Quarry mimics Until Dawn, and then how goofy it gets with what it adds to the mix. Like Until Dawn, you switch between controlling certain characters as the story dictates, and they often have prescribed branching points where they must pull off a quick time event of some kind to avoid death, or make some choice that might culminate in their survival. But the story beats themselves, kind of loop back to yet another feral race of monsters antagonizing our hapless group of dummies, and the speed and accuracy with which the kids figure out the species of these monsters and how to deal with them is ridiculous. The lore never makes much sense either, doing too many tropes at once without any real poetic or metaphysical compatibility. You've got a race of monsters who transmit their condition via bites, kind of like how the creatures of Until Dawn did by eating human flesh, and yet, weirdly enough, just like Until Dawn, the most powerful of their kind is white-colored, as if their design didn't mimic the Wendigos of Until Dawn enough already. This powerful white creature is also connected to the ghost of someone who died in a fire, and now is haunted by a ghost or something in the forest. What this has to do with these creatures is tenuous at best, and Grace Zabrisky's gypsy character is connected to those ghosts somehow. You meet her in between chapters to have your fortune read if you wish, showing you a glimpse of possible character deaths, but they're so vague as to not be very helpful or interesting, and beyond it being cool to see her chew up the scenery, it's a tonally weird thing for her to treat you, the player, as a character in the story, despite you not being anyone in particular, only controlling whomever the game asks you to. I think what's most bizarre is how the game tries to introduce another horror trope, the crazy hick family that'll do anything to anybody, a la my least favorite horror movie ever in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You've got Lance Henriksen, who's tying his horse to yet another broken down wagon as he did in Alone in the Dark 2.
He's an idealist. They're the worst.
We've got Earl's brother from My Name is Earl playing the big dumb guy we probably keep chained up in the woods and feed scraps, but he's a really good boy, even though he probably banged your cow. I'm so sorry about that, kindly neighbor. It won't happen again because he's a really good boy. And that little big head lady that plays the psychic from the Goofy Insidious movies. Good actors? Yeah. Without going into too much detail, these goofballs have something to do with this curse that's spread around town that's related to the ghost and the monsters, and they fulfill the role of a secondary set of antagonists that do all the human slasher things of tying people up or torturing them, and just being generally unreasonable and bumpkiny. In theory, I think their tropiness could work. They're just very boring representations of this trope. I'm sure they're there to give a relatable human face to the conflict and provide necessary backstory that the monsters can't do, but I found them confusingly motivated and so erratic in their characterization, I couldn't imagine them as people, merely a collection of things gross country people do when they're not busy seducing their close relatives. Unlike Until Dawn, where I tread on eggshells to make sure that my folks survived, I actually enjoyed seeing most of my party die horrible deaths. One of my favorite moments was when I was tasked with the choice of showing mercy to a creature that I had been told was completely evil. I chose to show him mercy because games rarely make this type of option available without some contrived, sentimental way to be the bigger person, even though there's nothing logically that's giving you any indication that this evil person will change. But my hesitation to shoot was met with utter disdain by the developers, as this creature viciously murdered 3 major characters immediately in such horrific fashion I can't show you on YouTube. And to be honest, I wasn't even mad. I was impressed that the game had the cojones to not pretend that there was some gray area here, and that I was a fool to dismiss all the warning signs.
Actually, I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
A story I'd cared very little about up until this point kind of leveled up right before my eyes, and I wish more games subverted expectations like this. And speaking of subverting expectations, let's look at the gameplay. No one familiar with the Supermassive catalog will be blown away by how the Quarry plays, but there have been some changes since I played Man of Medan that are worth pointing out. There's a lot more freedom to the walking sections now, and you're not just clicking around finding clues, or in the case of this game, tarot cards that unlock those glimpses into the future that we talked about earlier. These walking sections actually give you time to manipulate or discover things about the environment that affect your choices afterwards, which is a cool wrinkle. Unfortunately, these walking spaces with these interactable objects are often fairly wide open, and since a lot of these sections are timed and you walk so incredibly slowly, you often don't have the time you need to get to these things, to manipulate them, to get those choices to then be available, and so it just ends up not being worth it to engage them at all. So I ended up just kind of waiting out these sections and letting the game progress itself. There's also the issue of the game taking a good hour or two to get going. The opening scene is pretty suspenseful and sets lots of things in motion. You get a creepy encounter with Ted Raimi's sheriff, and the two protagonists I mentioned earlier get kidnapped, but once the game switches over to the main group of annoying friends, it just takes forever to get them to stop trading annoying banter or walk incredibly slowly doing menial tasks like bringing bags back into the house before things get interesting. It's just boring as hell and feels like padding. Supermassive tries to quote-unquote spice things up by giving you several mind-blowing ways to use the interact button. Random wide shots will ask you to quickly click to sort of stay on course so that something bad doesn't happen, but this really feels like the Netflix message that asks you if you're still watching this show and to say yes or no to keep watching. A tad bit more fun though is the hold your breath gimmick this game has. When hiding, bad guys will search around for you and kill you dead if you don't hold the use button to hold your breath until they're gone. The only trick is if you hold it for too long, meaning the breath meter runs out, you'll fail the sequence and alert somebody. It's not remotely tough except in how the game communicates whether the threat is past you and whether you can stop holding your breath. The music, swelling or not, is trying to help, but it's not always completely accurate and you can still fail sometimes if the music's died down. But the bad guy's still clearly close to your spot when you start breathing again and then you fail. So yeah, that said, there's nothing particularly innovative about how this game plays, not even in a Heavy Rain style gimmicky way, and it's honestly a little disappointing to see that Supermassive hasn't done much to the Until Dawn formula after 8 years and 5 games. And combined with the weirdly derivative nature of this story, how boring some of these side characters are, how roped in the ghost and crazy hick family tropes are, and how the ending is whether you keep the team alive or get them all killed, I'm just kind of running low on cares to give about this style of game. Now, I'm no gameplay purist or anything, and I've enjoyed and will someday review quite a few similar games like Walking Sims or Telltale's Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us, but Supermassive's catalog just isn't doing much for me these days. There's also some hilariously weird scripting that occurs from just having to balance all the different choices. Now, a lot of my footage got corrupted, so check out this footage I've borrowed from MK Ice and Fire and Teabag to see the difficulty that Supermassive had both in approximating any semblance of human behavior, but also in balancing the choice paths that you might take throughout the game. Big spoiler warning here. If you'd like to avoid spoiling the fates of certain characters in this game, just skip to the timestamp on screen.
Put me down, asshole! What the hell is going on up here?
We ain't keeping them safe anymore, Bobby. Not after what they did to our Kaylee. What the fuck is she doing? Hey, little bitch. You're singing off key.
Ryan, run! He took my knife.
I just love it. Do you see all those weird justifications for why characters would end up doing the same thing regardless of what happened? Oh my god, so many good moments there. From the ventriloquist yowling thing she does to be a distraction, to what is my favorite part of the comparison, where Overalls over here stabs Justice Smith in the back, and then it's like, hey, he stole my knife. That's not how that works, dude. Now, if you'll notice in the scene where these guys die, he just sort of stabs him as a reflex. But in the other scene in which nobody's hurt, the game still tells you that that's what he needs to do, so it comes off as even crazier than it did otherwise. So yeah, there's some weird scripting stuff in these games, and the Quarry is so goofy and wacky sometimes that it actually ends up charming you in spite of itself. So yeah, I think that's as good a time as any to say, that's the Quarry. Its mocap tech and graphical fidelity are often impressive, but sometimes shockingly plastically or slow, and its performances are, professional enough, if sometimes a little freaky to look at.
You got your screenshots? Everyone got your screenshots?
The characters vary from incredibly boring to pretty endearing like Dylan, so it's hard to care about some sections where the fate of someone dull is being given to you. And while the gameplay is nearly as boring as it's ever been, there are some shocking surprises in how the game will just go for your throat, and I can appreciate that. I think that's the game's true strength, when it makes you take it seriously. Is it arbitrary when these things happen? I mean, sure, the nature of finite creative space is that some of these things feel pretty abrupt, but the abruptness actually becomes immersive in that you don't dare to imagine these fates on your worst enemies, and yet here they are happening out of nowhere to people you're trying to care about. Now that's the strength of games like these, and for brief moments, the Quarry does what it came to do, make you care about the choices that you make. It's not often, but it does happen, and I think the game's all too rare comedic chops make this one I can't entirely dismiss as disappointing, even if it fails in many other ways to differentiate itself from or compete with Until Dawn's legacy. So no, it doesn't recapture the magic of Until Dawn, and I'll be very tepid to dip my toes back into the dark waters of Supermassive schlocky brews, but if you don't expect too much, you can have a couple afternoons worth of entertainment with the Quarry. Just beware the Hag of Hackett's Quarry.
What's the Hag of Hackett's Quarry?
You don't know about the Hag of Hackett's Quarry.
If I did, would I be asking, dumbass?
Tell her about the Hag of Hackett's Quarry.
I don't think she wants to know about the Hag of Hackett's
Can we
Quarry.
just please stop saying the Hag of Hackett's Quarry?
Now a huge shout out to those of you generous enough to support my work by subscribing to my Patreon. I have to thank Mark Neubauer, Deadforge, Hey Blondie, and Yaxo for their contributions, and I have to make a special point to thank the Nth Review and James Wyatt for subscribing to my highest Patreon tier and for giving me such great advice and encouragement over the years. If you like the work, feel free to join them over on Patreon, or you can become a YouTube channel member, or if you prefer, you can also now donate at Ko-Fi. God bless you everyone, and I'll see you soon.